is responsible for the Global Competence Center, because he's not going to say this himself, and I want you to know. He is responsible for the Competence Center Innovative Business Designs, which supports companies looking to adopt and profit from emerging technologies and business models. He previously worked for large international telcos, as well as media and internet players, so he's widely experienced, and he is currently in charge of the growing D.Little IoT ecosystem, and has completed several projects in that area, ranging from smart homes to connected cars and to Industry 4.0. Please, Ansgar Schlautmann.
Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me speak here the second time after last year. I had to actually change some slides, so you're going to see something new this time. I have only one slide that is actually the same, remained the same, but we will see, and maybe you will notice, because it was widely discussed last time. I just have 20 minutes, I guess, so I'll speed up the process. I think when we talk about IoT, and as it was correctly said already by Cohen, it used to be a very much technical thing. We had connected cars, we had fleet management systems, we had e-health. So it was very much, in a nutshell, a use case or a vertical that wanted to be smart in nature, and often driven by the IT and by the technology guys, by the innovation guys, which is a good thing. But since I'm doing M2M now since almost 10 years, we always had the same curve of uptake, and actually we just changed the years because it never really gotten to the big boom. I think we're now there, but it used to be very much a silo-driven approach, which ultimately wasn't really going somewhere. And I mean, just seeing that M2M now has become IoT is probably a wording thing, but actually it's more than just the wording thing. It is actually, you need to take into equation that it's not about the connectivity, or it's not only the connectivity between things. It has to be the services that you put on top of that, and you have to deal impactful in terms of making the user centric to the whole use case that you have. So it has to have a purpose in order to be successful, and it has to create value for the customer, be it the B2B customer, be it the consumer, or even be it the enterprise or the city. So we need to have a larger wrapper around these verticals today, and even going farther down the road, I think we need to bring all of these bits and pieces together in a second layer, which actually is the Internet of Everything. And I know it's actually a branded Cisco naming, but actually it is sort of the thing that needs to be, not the center. It's actually one part of the equation. So at the end of the day, when we talk about IoT today, we talk about humans, we talk about things, and we talk about the services, and obviously the ones who are providing that. Now, last year I already showed you that slide. This is the value chain deviation between the various players within this ecosystem, and you can see that there are lots of players in the ecosystem. We have the hardware players who provide the connectivity hardware. You have the telcos who do the connectivity bit, the network operations. You have a service enabler who is sort of the platform of choice that you want to have in order to connect these things, to have analytics on top of that, to connect ecosystems like in a car where you have the services, the apps, the infotainment, etc. You have the system integrators who are doing a great deal in actually bringing all of these pieces together in a physical way, but also in a cloud way. And finally, you have someone who's providing all of the services as a package, hopefully, as a package to a B2B customer or to a B2C customer. Now, when you look into the value that is actually generated by all of these different steps, you see that the hardware is somewhere between 5 to 10%, which is relatively clear because it's a one-time shot usually. And then you have the connectivity bits and the network operations, which are actually tackled by the telcos. Why I actually showed you this slide was because I had a long discussion last year with several of the attendees of the last event, and some telcos approached me and said, "Oh, well, 20% value generation isn't that bad, is it? I mean, it's still, we could do more, but let's start with these 10 to 20%. Now, the problem is when we look into the network environment for the future, we see that nearly 40% in 2020 will not be a cellular connectivity. It will be actually a low-power connectivity. It will be an alternative kind of network that will be driven by cost effectiveness, that will be driven by reach, that will be driven by very small data that is actually generated. Now, by actually having this uphill battle, we see that the operators, to a certain extent, need to prepare for this, because most of the operators as of today are really much targeting still the cellular business, so the 2G, the 3G, and even the 4G. And even 5G, to a certain extent, will never be able to do very low cost use cases, because it's simply too expensive in terms of hardware and infrastructure. Now, the answer to that question could be, for a telco's perspective, to say, well, then I just invest in a next network, in a low-power network, and then I'm having it again. The problem, however, is that in the low-power environment, you have not one standard, you have, well, at least 5. You have licensed spectrum, which is operator-owned, but you have also spectrum that is unlicensed by nature, so you can actually buy your own network, you can build your own network here if you want, low cost. And it's also driven by big players that are actually, to a certain extent, not really in the mood to create one general standard. So at the end of the day, by 2020, we will have a very large amount of different technologies for the connectivity bit at least, and it's not quite clear if only the operators will actually work in this kind of value chain step connectivity and network operations, or it will to a certain extent be democratized so that even customers themselves can build their own networks locally in the unlicensed spectrum, for example. So that's a little bit of a shake-up, and we think that all of these kind of technologies have a certain right in its own. We will see and we will expect that the one who's actually managing all of these different things the best, who really connects the dots between all of these technologies, is one of the key winners of this environment. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is when we talk not about the telcos, but when we talk about the users, the ones who are actually building these smart devices. We see Tag Heuer from Switzerland was building now, coming from a classical watch, now starting with smartwatches. Nest, I don't have to explain Nest, I guess. And even Samsung, with their Smart Things initiatives, are actually now driving to actually make hardware intelligent. The problem with making hardware intelligent to a certain extent, however, is that you don't really create value. Just the connectivity bit on a hardware is not bringing any value per se. So what is actually missing to lots of these cases is the services that you can sell, the services that make the difference. And we can see services and value creation in a variety of ways. Either by connecting, we can save cost, we can differentiate the hardware, we can put services on top of that actually are sold, we can put new business models in place because we want to, for example, link the car with the insurance company, so the insurance company gets something from the data that the car is generating, but then again, the car is financed by the insurance company, for example. So you get new ecosystem players into the equation. And the highest amount of business cases, and we did that for a smart city in Middle East just the other day, is actually this ecosystem management. So you are actually even more enlarging your little piece of hardware into a complete ecosystem environment and connect in this ecosystem environment with value. So, however, the problem with this kind of logic is that the business models that are required to actually build up these different use cases, these different ecosystem plays, are relatively complex in nature. So you have like crowdfunding, you have open source environments, you want to do data monetization, so you want to actually expose data and get money for that. So in all of these cases, as the higher you get, obviously the more complex it gets as well. That requires, and that was actually what Cohen also said, new players. It requires new capabilities. It requires a new way of thinking about, for example, a city. Is a city a conglomerate of small use cases, or do we actually need someone to bring this information together and make the data, make the information more meaningful to the customers and even to the government? So what we're currently missing is this kind of aggregation, this service enablement layer that actually we perceive as IDL, at least, that, for example, telcos are quite well positioned to play that role. But as of today, most telcos that we see are relatively still in their product-related service environment. So yes, we need to definitely work on our business model thinking, because the more open you get, the more actually gets out of it. What we usually do, and this is just a small list of example customers, what we do is actually we do not differentiate anymore too much if it's a smart city project or if it's a connected car project or even if it's an M2M IoT project for a telco, because the 5 key dimensions that you need to tackle in order to make your ideas successful are those 5. First of all, you have to identify and to understand what is the strategy that you actually want to impose. I had a discussion with a window manufacturer who wanted to get into the smart home environment, and the CFO told me, yeah, you have to make sure that I'm selling more windows. Actually, that will never happen, because what he's actually going to sell is not more windows, he's going to sell services for a window. So that is just the logical point of view, how you actually will build your business case. What's the strategy that you actually want to bring for the future? That has to be clear, that has to be accepted within an organization. And you can ask, in a car manufacturer, you can ask the F&E, you can ask the R&D, you can ask the marketing guys, you can ask the CIO and the CEO, and all of them will probably have a different kind of feeling what their IoT strategy is. So that needs to be aligned in the first place. Secondly, obviously, you need to define what are the services that you want to offer. Because at the end of the day, we had the famous fridge and toaster discussion. Is that actually a meaningful product that you want to bring out to the market? Probably not. So it needs to be clear what the services and propositions are that you actually want to bring to the market. And the third question obviously then correlates directly with that. What of these services do I actually have to offer, and which are actually services that others are offering and I'm just bringing them in? So what's my partnering strategy? How many partners do I need? What are the partners that I need? For what do I need the partners? Do I need the insurance company? Do I need a bank? Do I need a technical partner? Do I need a platform? These things are usually very, very important to bring traction to the table. And again, as you also said, organizational setup. I just gave you the example of the car manufacturer. If you have 3 different areas who talk about IoT, then there will be never one consistent strategy about the IoT strategy. But it will be also no consistent execution of the strategy. So hence, once you get into this kind of, I need to bring connectivity, I need to bring smartness to my products, you probably need to have someone who's coordinating, who's making sure that all of these people talk to each other. It doesn't necessarily have to be a CDO, to be honest. I'm not quite sure that putting one central head on top of that will help. But I guess that, the fundamental change is you need to think in a horizontal way across your company and even beyond your company. You don't have to think in R&D, marketing, IT, because you're thinking use cases. And last but not least, obviously, the question, and we deliberately put it on the lowest level, not necessarily as the most important one, but it is one of the most important ones, obviously, is the technology. Which technology partners do I have to have? Which technology in terms of connectivity do I need? Which application enablement do I need? How do I connect these things? How do I make sure that my data is secure across the board? And how do I exchange data between ecosystems? So this is then the final step of an IoT strategy that, as we usually do, are the 4, 5 dimensions that we look into, and that every company who's going into this has to answer, has to get an idea about that. Having said that, that's my final take. Thank you.